Welcome back to the table. Today I am going to bring you an overview of Far Cry Beyond from FunForge and Ubisoft. Now you might recognize the name Far Cry from that video game franchise upon which this game is based. However, this game is not based on any one particular Far Cry entry, but rather based on kind of the franchise as a whole and stands as its own entry into that franchise. So of course you're going to see elements, some of that connective tissue that kind of makes up all the Far Cry games you're going to see here. So that element of like survival, that heavy emphasis is on the narrative, fighting against some kind of villainous force, and then uncovering secrets along the way through a lot of different branching narratives. So all of that is kind of present here in Far Cry Beyond with a few twists. None of those I'm going to spoil for you today. In fact, I can't really spoil anything for you. I'm playing a starting scenario that was kind of given to me to play through that's kind of serves as a prologue to the game, so I can't actually give anything away even if I wanted to. However, that being said, there's still some content that I'm not showing you because I want some things to be a surprise. Now, I have kind of set up the game already here, and I've been playing through the game with two characters. Before we get started and jump in, I do want to say one thing, and this is straight from the publishers themselves. This game was kind of built with villains taking the form of the Russians, the Russian military. And just given the state of things in the globe right now, they've actually decided to make a change and step away from that. So the final version of the game won't actually feature Russians in that villain role. So they're going to be making some changes. So anything you see here that references that specifically or any imagery, we apologize. That is just part of the prototype. They said go ahead and show it, just with that knowledge that it won't be there for the final version of the game. So with that out of the way, let me talk about this game itself. Now, as you're kind of already seeing here, this is not really a legacy game, but it is a campaign game. And it's going to have a lot of the stuff that you'd expect from a campaign game. A lot of those boxes to open and a lot of envelopes to open. And these envelopes are going to contain new characters, scenes, mechanics, rules, possibly even tokens and things like that. So as you play through this game, even just that starting scenario that I was given, which runs over 3 different maps, there's a lot of content that I missed. There's a lot of stuff that I didn't see even in that short time I played, because different decisions that you're making in the game are going to tell you maybe to open up different envelopes. And you might even have some smaller envelopes inside those bigger envelopes that are linked to maybe alternative victory conditions, or if you go one way instead of the other. Some of these might give you different, switches to flip or different doors to go out, or just different decisions in general that will have you open up different envelopes even within each one scenario. So you're going to start the game, and the game does give you kind of a guide to just let you jump right in. It tells you kind of how to set up your characters. There are a lot of characters in the game, and each character is going to get one of these templates. And you can kind of see that kind of neon art style that's present with these characters. That style kind of permeates this entire game and kind of ties into that whole Beyond keyword there in the title, which you can draw your own conclusions as to how that's going to play out in the actual campaign, but trust me, it does mean something. So you're going to be given one of these characters to start with, and each one of these characters is going to have their different starting setup as far as how much health they have, how many move points they gain, and then what their starting weapons are going to be. So you've got weapons, you've got stunts, and you've got something called reactions. And you're going to have a number of these reaction cards. Each player is going to get 3 at the start of the game. I've chosen 2 characters here to give you this overview. Bal Reyes, who uses a sniper rifle, and then Butch and Rosie. This is a separate character. This character actually comes with a dog as well. Rosie can do things for you, and Rosie can take their own actions on your turn, which is kind of neat. So some of these characters have a variety of these different methods. Now, of course, there are a ton of other characters that you could be choosing to play as, and potentially more to be unlocked over the course of the game. Who knows what's going to be contained in all those different boxes. I mean, there's a ton of those different boxes. So you're going to place those out in front of you. You're going to track your health points, your movement points. You're going to place everything around you. There's a spot for status effects you might suffer, for your weapons to go, your stunts to go, and your reactions to go. And we'll talk about how those are used during the game. You're also going to set aside the enemy boards. And again, you're going to be unlocking more of these enemy boards as you go. Each one of these enemy boards can have up to 4 different figures. And you'll see on a board that there are 4 different spaces. And these spaces are color-coded: green, orange, purple, and red. And so you're going to be able to reference directly whichever enemies on the battlefield, and you'll know kind of how much health points they have. These enemy cards can also be upgraded. They can potentially do more damage. They can potentially gain more movement as well over the course of the game. They can suffer status effects as well, and they are dealt damage. and they can take a certain amount of damage, up to their health value. But what's interesting here is with the enemies, the amount of damage they've taken dictates how they're going to act on their turn. So we'll talk about that. I've set out all the other decks, the reaction deck, the loot decks, the weapon decks, all the different tokens that you're going to start the game with. And then I've already set up the map. Every time you open up one of those envelopes, it's going to give you something like this. It's going to give you basically a scenario breakdown. Now, this is the start of the game. We don't really get to make any decisions here. It's just going to take us directly to the starting map. But you can read through all the different text. It's all the different story and flavor of the game. And then it's going to jump right into your setup. And you can have, 2-player game up to a 4-player game set up here. And it's going to tell you what content you just unlocked. So if you just open up an envelope, it's going to tell you everything you should have. It's going to give you instructions on how to set up the board, and it's going to tell you potentially your objective. But if you see here, it says objective, defeat all enemies, and then open up envelope 905. So after you defeat all enemies, you're going to an envelope, you're opening that envelope, and that envelope might give you a new thing that happens. Sure, you defeated all the enemies, here comes the second wave. Or here comes a new map. Now you're running out of this gas station that we start on into a new map. Or it might give you a decision. Spoiler alert, this one actually does give you a decision. It lets you kind of move from building to building, or you can just run out into the middle of this big main street area and try to fight off the enemy that way. So you get to kind of make those decisions that will dictate not only which path you take, but also the encounters that you're going along on the way. So this can all change based on your decisions. So if you're kind of getting that Far Cry vibe of you getting to kind of control the order that you do things, that is very much present here. But ultimately, it's going to lead to some kind of an encounter like this. And this is where the actual tactical combat comes into play. So this is a little bit different than what you might see in the Far Cry video game. In a Far Cry game, you're generally just one character. Maybe you've got some allies, but you're generally fighting alone, trying to, makeshift weapons and do your best to survive while fighting back against the enemy. This is actually going to give you teammates, the other players around the table, and you're going to be able to take your turns together simultaneously, which adds kind of a new element to tactical combat because you can set yourself up now. Each one of these characters, like I said, is going to have a number of action points or movement points that they can spend, and they can spend that to move. They can also spend that to use their stunts. Some of these stunts and also some of these reactions are going to allow you to mess with positioning on the game. They're going to allow you to boost other players up maybe to elevation. They're going to help you get behind cover. They're going to maybe help you expose an enemy. So you can kind of look around the table and communicate with each other. Okay, well, I'm going to move a couple steps so I can knock this character out from cover so that you can come around and get a good shot at them. So you can do those things in any order. Every character has those points to spend. Or you can just say, hey, I'm just going to run and pick up one of these loot tokens. I don't care what everybody else is doing. I want this loot. I'm going to draw a loot card, and then I'm going to use that loot on my turn. So, there's a level of cooperation that is up to the table. Everyone can kind of just do their own thing, running around shooting and using their weapons. But I promise you, it's going to go a lot smoother if you cooperate. Some of these scenarios, even the ones that I played here in this tutorial mode, get kind of difficult if you're not working together. Combat is based on rolling dice, but you're going to have not only a lot of mitigation to the die, but you're going to have a pretty good idea of how well you'll succeed. These dice are broken down into different levels based on how many hit symbols you're going to have on those dice. And your die is going to tell you how many you're going to roll. So for example, my shotgun here tells me that I get to roll a yellow die. However, if I'm up close, I get to upgrade that yellow die to an orange die. So the closer I get to somebody with my shotgun, I actually get to roll better. Now, Ball with his sniper rifle is actually the opposite. He rolls an orange die, which is kind of medium tier, but if he's right up close to somebody, he rolls a red die, which is the worst die you could roll in the game. So his sniper rifle is not great if you're engaged with somebody, but he can get kind of farther away, and he can roll that orange die, which is actually pretty good and has a pretty high chance of success. Now, these dice can be mitigated by the stunts that you have, by the reactions that you have, by particular items that you may have gained or loot cards that you've achieved over the course of the game. You can also modify your weapons over time. Of course, you're going to have to find these modifications. You're going to have to maybe do some things that aren't what the scenario wants you to do, or maybe explore some interactive tokens that are out on the board, or whatever you need to do to find these upgrades. But you can upgrade these weapons over time, and they will do better. They'll roll better dice, give you chances for re-rolls, or roll this black die, which is the worst die, but sometimes this is used to determine if your weapon's going to score a critical hit. So some of the weapons, even the enemy weapons, can possibly roll that black die. And that is basically your turn. You're just simply moving around, spending all of your points in a smart way, and using whatever weapons you have. Every character is going to have a variety of different weapons. These weapons can be used once per round. You're going to tap them, and you're going to roll your dice against the opponent's defense. They could potentially be rolling blue dodge dice, which will help them dodge the attack. This is especially prevalent if they are behind cover, because there's an entire overlaying cover system. I'm not going to get too in the weeds with how all the combat rules work. Just know that if you are behind cover, you have a pretty good chance of dodging that. However, some pieces of cover can be out on the board that can be destroyed. So if you actually do damage to the cover, it goes away, leaving someone exposed. And that brings me right back to that whole timing element of the game. Timing your shot. Maybe you're planning on missing just to get the cover out of the way so another player can have a better shot. Also, if you've got Rosie in play, Rosie's a character just like anybody else with their own set of action cards that she can do. These are called orders that she can take, and she can move around and grab items for you and kind of push around people by barking at them and even bite them. So you have a pretty functional team here. Like I said, with everybody working together, spending all their action points, setting up for your big combat turns. Because ultimately what you're trying to do is deal damage to these figures. And like I showed, that damage is being tracked in each one of the little health boxes for each character. Now what's really unique is the way that the AI is being handled here. Because after everyone goes, after all the players go, the enemies get to go. And you're going to go in initiative order. So you'll see an initiative order printed on these enemy tiles. And then they're going to go kind of clockwise around. So you'll start with green and go around with each character acting. But each character is going to have 2 different cards. And these cards are going to dictate their actions that they'll take based on how much damage they've taken. So for example, the green character, if he's taken 0 damage, he's going to move towards the target and attack them. However, if he has taken more damage, he's going to kind of go into a rage and he's actually going to increase his ability to do damage. So you need to kind of watch how much damage you're doing because you'll get to know how they're going to act so you can get a plan for their actions. For example, if their action pattern has them moving in, maybe you want to be outside of their range. But if they're taking more damage, maybe it's increasing the range of their movement. And so now you're suddenly within range when you thought you were safe. And of course, these enemy cards can change as well. You could get new behavior cards in one of these envelopes or boxes. You will definitely get new enemy tiles that represent the new different types of enemies you're going to encounter over the course of an entire campaign. But this is kind of your targets. Most scenarios are going to have you fighting in some fashion. However, eliminating your enemy is not always the objective of every different scenario, every different map. Sometimes it wants you to just get out or get a specific item or hit a specific switch or get somebody to safety. I mean, these are different goals. So sometimes, like in the starting scenario here, it does want me just to eliminate all the enemies to find out what happens next. If I were to do that, if I were to eliminate all the enemies, then I get to go open up the next envelope, follow what it says, read some more story, make some more decisions, and continue on with my campaign in one direction or the other. Now you'll have to keep playing until you can beat that objective, but what's interesting about this game is that if a player gets knocked out, you have a certain number of revive tokens. So you'll get a different number of these revive tokens that you can actually spend to revive a character. You can also use these to switch out characters in between missions. So if you completed this mission or this scenario and you want to use a different character because maybe your character's taking too much damage, you don't have time to rest, you can bring in one of the other characters by using that switch token. Now the game is broken up into acts and you get a number of these revive tokens for each act. And each act can be broken up into any number of these scenarios based on the paths that you take, the decisions you take. Maybe you can skip some scenarios with some, clever thinking, or maybe you just have to play through all your alternate different branching patterns. The point is you don't know where you're going next. You don't know what's going to happen in the mission after this one. Even if you've played Far Cry Beyond already all the way through, your table might make different decisions, and so you can never really be sure that you're going to go down a certain path, that you're going to see the same items every game, that you're even going to see the same enemies every game, because there were some new enemies that were introduced in a scenario that we didn't do when we played because we chose a different direction. And so this is going to kind of keep the game fresh and allow for replayability, and also it is a campaign game. It isn't a legacy game, although you are going to get some new rules over the course of the game, and some things in the rulebook are going to change as you play. But you can easily reset the game and go back to the start and play through that entire campaign back from the beginning. So that is Far Cry Beyond. If you are a Far Cry fan, I think this game is going to tick a lot of Far Cry boxes for you as far as that branching narrative, that feeling of exploration, of getting to choose where you go next as you move through. There's some things that I would love to see in this game that I'm not sure if they'll have or not because I haven't gotten to play the actual campaign, but there are just some cool, iconic Far Cry elements that I think they're going to find ways to weave through this game because, like I said, this was just the kind of prologue. And based on where this prologue ended, that's where the campaign is about we're going to start. So I got to kind of see the build up to something pretty cool that's going to kick off, I think, your campaign in a really exciting direction, and it shouldn't be too long before you see that this is different from most Far Cry games. There's some elements in play here that are really exciting and neat and came as quite a surprise to me. So take a look at their campaign page if you want to ask any questions or see what all the final components are going to look like. You can also post your questions down below in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them, but please let me know what your favorite Far Cry game is. I know 6 just came out. A lot of people have been playing that one like crazy. So thank you again for watching today as we took a look at this game. Please like, subscribe, follow us here at MVM, and until we see you again, just keep having fun at the table.
Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.